Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. If you hadn't seen the news, Joe Biden has said that he's going to do everything in his power this lame duck session of Congress that's coming up right before the House changes and the Senate changes a little bit. So he's going to try to go directly for gun bans. The odds are a little long that he's going to get it passed, but that's still a possibility, something you need to look out for. So as far as news stuff to be watching for, that's the one I would be watching out for the most. It won't be until mid-December, I think, before they release the stuff about the pistol braces. And again, I expect that to be challenged in court, and I actually expect them to win. Because this was something that was devised to help people shoot a certain type of firearm, specifically disabled veterans. I don't see Congress allowing this to go, and I don't see the Supreme Court allowing this to go because these are in common use, and they've already sided with us on that. So let's get to the fun stuff. Now, getting ready to own, it still hasn't come in yet, my first PCC or pistol caliber carbine. Well, this isn't a carbine, it'll be a pistol. But still, same idea that it's something that takes the same round as like my sidearm, my Glock. Doesn't take the same mag, that would be kind of cool, but I kind of don't like Glock straight mags, so they kind of annoy me. I don't know why, but they do. But holy moly, are there options for PCCs right now. You know, I never thought I would understand it until I guess I shot more than a couple of them. And the reason being is that I've always been more of a longer ranged rifle, meaning that my preference is towards, I don't know, 308 usually, or 7.62 by 39 or 5.56. It is never towards my sidearm. My sidearm I train with all the time. I love my 9mm. I'm a reformed 45 guy. Having taken, I don't know how many defensive pistol classes now from different trainers and different stuff, I realized that 45 is great. It is, I love it to death. It's accurate, but there's something to be said about having 15 rounds in a magazine, especially during a course of fire. And when I say this, you have to go through like clear a house in one of the trainings I've done. With that, having to swap a magazine every 7 rounds sucks if you're carrying a 1911. Now I have a Glock 30 also that I could carry, but it only holds 10 or 11 rounds. I can get extra mags or extended mags for them too, but again, this starts to stick out. Why I like the Glock frame, okay, is for every pistol caliber that Glock has in that range, meaning that like a Glock 26, a Glock 19, a Glock 70, 17, and it's either a 34 or 35. It's the 9mm extreme long slide. Either way, the magazines from all of them are backwards compatible, for one, so you can use them in older Glocks or use newer or use old mags in newer Glocks. The other thing I like about them is like they all have a baby of its type, a subcompact version. So I have a Glock 26 also, and it is usually my standard carry gun. It or my Glock 19. But I can take my Glock 19 mags and drop them in my Glock 26. I can take a Glock 17 mag and stick it in my Glock 26, my Glock 19, and I'm good to go. I can take one of the long 31 round, or 32 or whatever they are, round Glock mags, and I can put it in my Glock 17, Glock 34, 35, whatever the long slide one is. The 17, 19, and the 26. Now it gets different when you start looking at like the 43X or any of the X things, because they have special magazines that give them their capacity. Because the 43X is longer in the grip, I believe, and it allows it to get kind of like almost like what the SIG does with its magazine. So it gets almost the capacity of what the SIG does, but not quite. And when I mean SIG P365. P365 SIG has been the gold standard for concealed carry. It's one that I probably will end up getting eventually. But when I get back to the pistol caliber carbines, holy moly. Let's talk about if you wanted to do a 22 setup. How many 22 rifles, 22, I guess you would call them history prop guns. What I mean is like the AK version or the Sturmgewehr 22s or even the MP5 guys in a 22. You could get a Mark II 22 pistol or an SR22 pistol, or you could get a Smith & Wesson pistol, a Buckhorn, or anything like that. You could pair them up. Step up to a 380. Here's what's weird. You can actually find sub-caliber or pistol caliber rifles in 380. High Point makes one. There is a submachine gun. Mac Ingrams makes a Mac 10, or the same gun, just scaled down for the 380, in 380. So the 380 has always been kind of more popular than we like to admit, and it's one of those rounds that is coming into its own now with better propellants and better projectiles. There is a place for the 380. I know people will argue with me about that, but where that place is deep concealment, and with modern rounds like Lehigh Defense or some of the other ones that have come out that with a similar concept, they give the penetration and they give the expansion or the wounding capacity to do it, especially for people that are recoil sensitive or need deep concealment. Go to the 9mm. Now you have the Ruger their PCC. You have SIG's MCX. You have the Rattler. You have the MP5s. You have the ARs, either the old school car ARs with the proprietary Colt mags, or now you have the Glock ones that are there. Then CMMG rolled in and they made a delay so that it would lock up a little bit and made the recoil better. Because a lot of subguns or PCCs are blowback action. If you don't know what blowback means, is it means it has to have a really heavy bolt and carrier, or all one mass, to hold the cartridge after it's fired in place long enough for it to safely depressurize before it cycles the gun. So it has to have enough mass to do that. Most PCCs, a good chunk of them, operate on that principle. And that's what needs to be fixed if you get into that world. That's where the MP5 shines, as far as a PCC to me, is that every bit of the press that I've heard about them is 100% correct. They're accurate. The triggers do suck, but it's a typical HK trigger, and I'm used to that. There is no bolt hold open, because the mass of the bolt and carrier of such a weapon makes that not easy to do, especially how the weapon's designed and constructed. Specifically, it uses sheet metal that is tempered and folded for the receiver, and that's not strong enough to hold a bolt carrier or a bolt catch of some kind. Plus, back in the day when these guns were made in the 60s, that was saw as a flaw because you didn't want to get crap in the gun. So the best way to keep crap from getting in the gun was have the action stay shut. If you've ever fired an open bolt submachine gun, I have had the pleasure of doing that a couple times now at Battlefield. And what you notice is the triggers suck. And then there's a little bit of a clunk forward. Okay? You get used to it about the second or third round, but you get used to it doing weird stuff. You notice that the cadence is way off. Okay? That's what's different. And when I say cadence, the gun balance is different while it's firing. You can feel it. Okay, it actually rocks a little bit more. But we've gotten better and better. Look at there's new roller delayed systems that aren't traditional, like the HK that came out for the 9mm. I know they make the UMP in 40, 45, and 10mm. They did way back in the gap. There was a time frame that HK made the MP5 in 10mm also. So the PCC has been around since the cowboy days, and I've always looked at it and went, yeah, I don't understand it. I don't see the point. I think I see it a little more now, in that if you had, like I'm going to have my MP5 and my Glock, so now I am capable of holding a weapon with 30 rounds or 50 or 100, that my pistol, if we get into a bind and that one goes down, I can use the same ammunition sources to either load the gun I have to top off extra magazines I have for it. The 9mm is dramatically lighter in weight, or size at least, in to a 5.56, so you can carry a lot more of them, but that trade-off comes with you don't get the range that the others would have. You're talking about 100 to 200 meters, and you're stretching it at those two ranges. So anything up to that. But if you're in a city, that makes a lot of sense. If you don't plan on shooting that far, that makes distance, that is. That makes a lot of sense. In this area where I live, it's more open, but I live in a city, and to cast evac to get out of the city, I would use something like this, is what I think. But I also would feel just as comfortable with AK or AR for the same job. It makes sense for home defense. A pistol, there are a variety of rounds designed so that they won't go through multiple walls or through a wall. And they're done that way because SWAT guys needed them. Because guys, sneaky squirrel guys that go and, have to rescue people in airplanes needed rounds to do certain things when they went in there without hurting anyone else. That's why the MP5 got so big, is that the German GSG and the British SAS started using them. Our SEAL team started using them. Anti-terrorist guys started using PCCs, and specifically most of these groups were using MP5s. If you look at early days of Vietnam, of the SEAL teams that were Raider kind of guys, they used a lot of submachine guns, either native to the fight, meaning they were Pepashas or PPSHs, PPS 41s, 43s, that type of machine gun, or they ended up with something that was American. And the Thompson, the reason why we stopped producing the Thompson is it was heavy. It takes a lot of metal, a lot of machining to make a Thompson. Could you imagine carrying one of those in the jungles of Vietnam where it weighs, almost as much as an M1 Garand? And with a full loaded drum or stick mag, it probably does weigh as much. Yeah, with half as much of range, not even half as much, a third of the, a quarter of the range that a M1 would have. But in the jungles of Vietnam, that makes sense. There were some Smith & Wesson ARs that were made after Madsen machine guns, or Swedish Ks. My friend Lance has one, the guy that owns Go Rogue. And he let me try it out. And it's an amazing piece of hardware. Till you find out how much the magazines are and how rare the magazines are nowadays. They shouldn't be that way, because I see it as a piece of history. You know, it's a historical piece that he has in his collection. That's what binds me to a lot of the firearms in my collection, is the historical pieces of them. Yeah, my PTRs aren't HKs. However, they have the same craftsmanship that the HK does. They have the same design. It is one for one. They have the same parts compatibility. The only thing it's weird is it has a welded rail on top of the receiver of the PTR series rifles. PTR made the C96 that I have. That's why it's straight, I believe. And the sights, I could zero my gun, unlike Mac on Military Arms Channel. But PCCs are kind of cool, I'm looking at. Magazines for MP5s, oh man, if you're getting metal mags, they're about $70 a pop. I probably am going to be having to try to figure out how to use the polymer ones for a while at least. Like, share, subscribe, be great.